If there's one critique I have of my own photography, is that sometimes I make my life way too complex. Sometimes I need to give myself a slap and say, keep it simple, silly. Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Laux and I have another camera review for you today. And I'm continuing on my theme of getting my hands on cheap autofocus SLRs from the 1990s, early 2000s. And today's camera is no different. And I'm talking about the EOS 3000 or the EOS 3000. Now, if you've watched my videos, I am primarily a Nikon shooter, but you know what? Canon produced some amazing, cheap, affordable, plus being able to use a ton of amazing glass SLRs through the 90s and early 2000s, right into the early DSLRs. And if it wasn't for my investment in the Nikon system, I probably would have gone Canon myself. But you know what? There's no time like the present to get started in a new system, as crazy as that sounds. So before we start with the walk, let's get back into the studio. I can tell you a background of the camera, go over its functions, and give you a tour of the features. All right, see you back here in a few. 1985, Minolta releases the Maxxum 7000 and changes the face of photography forever. The Maxxum series, being the first commercially successful autofocus camera, left other manufacturers scrambling to catch up. Of course, Canon's direct response to this would be the T80 in 1986. The T80 is unique in the sense that it used the existing FD mount and a 3CCD phase detection TTL system that would actually bounce and pick up focusing data, then transfer it to an autofocus motor built into a special line of lenses that worked only on the T80. But Canon wasn't going to stop there. They took a page out of Minolta's book and in 1987 released the EOS system. The EOS 650 was a true game changer for Canon and really set the stage for all their modern cameras. Now, the 650 is not a perfect camera, but you know what? If you like the 1980s aesthetic, then it is a perfect camera for your collection, and I know I'm a big fan of mine. Of course, the 650 was not designed for the entry-level photographer, so in 1988, Canon released the EOS 750. Now, the 750 differs from the 650 in the sense that it was designed, you pulled it out of the box, you put in batteries, you loaded film, you mounted the lens, and you could go out and shoot. It was completely automatic from autofocus to auto exposure. And you know what? It worked. It wasn't a big seller, but it showed the world that Canon could produce an entry-level camera. So in 1990, they released the first major update to their entry-level cameras with the EOS 700. Now the 700 introduced the idea of a single dial interface where you could use the dial to change your settings, increase, decrease the ISO, make all your custom changes. And it really fell within Canon's design ethos of the time of keeping things as simple as possible. But it was still a fully automatic camera at the end of the day. In 1995, the release of the EOS 5000 would finally give some sort of control to the photographer with the addition of shutter priority, or TV in Canon lingo. But people still wanted more. There were a lot more people learning photography and needed some sort of override of that program mode. Well, in 1999, their cries were answered with the release of the EOS 3000. Finally, for the first time on a true entry-level SLR from Canon, you had full program mode, aperture priority, shutter priority, and metered manual. And the 3000 hit that sweet spot, so much so that it would be re-released twice. Once the 3000N in 2002, and again in 2003 with the 3000V. And even early entry-level Canon digital SLRs would keep that 3000 chassis and design ethos alive. So let's take a look at this game-changing entry-level SLR from Canon. And here it is, the Canon EOS 3000, a camera truly of the era of the late 90s, early 2000s. And it is fairly simple from the front. You have your standard lens, the nameplate, a focus assist light, which was very common. Up in the prism, you have a simple flip-up flash. This is a manual actuated flash. There's no real automatic pop. And you know what? If you need just that quick burst of light, this is fantastic. But on the top, you have a standard hot shoe for your Canon flashes. And continuing on the top, this is where a lot of your controls are. You have that single command dial again with your, this also acts as your on-off switch, and you have various functions, creative modes, the green box, and your various exposure modes. You have a nice little LCD screen. This actually tells you everything you need to know. You have timer, red light, shutter release, and a single command dial. On the back, you have your AV button. Now, this is what you press when you're in manual mode to change out your aperture, but more on that later, and your flash focus. Film back, the release, and on the bottom, you have your battery pack. Now, like most cameras from the 90s, this does take a specialized battery, so it is a little bit more expensive, but you know what? They do last forever, especially if you remember to turn your camera to L or lock. And that's it, nice and simple. Your lens release switch, this really is a camera that does everything it says on the tin. You pull it out of the box, you load film, put in batteries, lens on, and you're good to go. You don't have to go beyond that. But let's talk a little bit closer about how to work this camera. One of the nice things about the EOS 3000 is that it is a EF mount camera, which means you have access to some weird and some amazing optics. So thankfully, Canon made it really simple to mount lenses. You simply line up your red dot on the camera body with the red dot on the lens, put in, twist, and you're good to go. Everything is in the lens. You have your focusing motor and aperture control. Everything's electronic on it, which is both good and bad, but whatever. I'll talk a little bit more on the optics later. So, working the camera, again, you have everything right here on your dial. L indicates locked, full program mode here. You have shutter priority, which is on Canon indicated by a TV or time value, aperture priority or aperture value, and full metered manual. Now, the one downside to this camera, if you are used to working with Nikon, especially higher end Nikon cameras or higher end Canon cameras, there is only a single control dial. So the control dial by default will adjust your shutter speed. If you want to adjust the aperture, you need to press the AV button here in addition to turning that dial. So it is a bit difficult. I highly recommend running it in either program mode, shutter priority, or aperture priority. Now, you also have a few options here. You can tell it that you can turn it to wanting to beep or not. I leave it off because frankly I find that annoying. You also can adjust your ISO here. So I'm just going to crank it up to 400 because that's what we're going to be shooting later. And it also has DX code. You can also do a rewind later. Now, one of the really nice things about this camera is that it has the creative modes. So if you're unfamiliar with how to get your settings just right and want to sort of get that professional look, you can use the different creative modes, and it includes portrait, landscape, macro, and action. And the nice thing is that you can use that to really learn the different ways to shoot, and it really helps out. All right, let's get this film loaded and we can finally get out to shooting this. So all you need to do, make sure it's turned on. You got your release here. And today I'm shooting a lovely roll of Delta 400, and I'm shooting it at box speed, and we're going to be developing it in ID11 1:1. Make sure that film tip is at least to the red, close the lid, and it automatically loads. Now, the one thing that Canon will do that is completely different from all the others is it will automatically feed all the way to the end of the roll from the start, and then you're ready to go. And then it will rewind the film back into the canister, so heaven forbid you do open the back mid-roll, you only lose a few frames, hopefully. All right, nice and simple. Let's get back out into the field. Okay, so today I am here in the northern part of Old Oakville. Let's get walking. I got a fresh roll of Delta 400 loaded and the 28 to 80 millimeter kit lens, the advanced kit lens, and let's talk about my experience with the camera. All right, let's go. Simplicity was something that Canon was working on in the late 1990s and early 2000s. They even had a branding of KISS on some of their cameras, not to be confused with the glam rock band of the same name. And it's this ethos where the EOS 3000 fits in, and simple is the name of the game. The camera is light, easy to carry, and while a little small in my hands, this is perfect for someone looking to get into 35mm photography without breaking the bank. When it comes to using the camera, stick to automatic. Set the camera in either program, aperture, or shutter priority modes with full autofocus. As soon as you start using that manual metered mode, you must press a separate button to adjust the aperture. And while the button is easily accessed from a traditional holding option, it's small and a bit tricky to hold the button while turning the dial. The viewfinder for a camera of this type is brighter than I expected, and there's plenty of information relayed to you through that viewfinder. Your exposure settings, EV adjustment, and a film counter. And the metering is excellent, with the auto exposure mode delivering solid readings every time. Autofocus is nearly silent, snappy, and accurate. The shutter and film advanced motors are equally quiet. And the controls are well laid out. Everything is easy within reach and is clearly labeled. Even without reading a manual, you can take this camera out of the box, mount a lens, load film, get out, and take pictures. While the camera does have the dreaded green box mode, I recommend sticking to straight up program mode. Ultimately, the EOS 3000 is a fun camera and works well for a photographer of any level. The biggest downside is that the camera takes its CR123A batteries. A pair of them, while readily available today, are costly. Thankfully, Canon released a battery pack, the BP8, that allows you to power the camera using only 4 AA batteries. Now, one of the advantages of using an EOS body is that you have access to an incredible catalog of lenses. Now, my collection right now is just small, but let's head back to the studio anyways and I can discuss the 4 lenses that I have with me. Of course, what is an SLR without the ability to change out lenses? Now, my collection of EF lenses is a little small. I am just starting out, but I do have a few lenses available to me, which makes the system a lot more usable. Of course, the number one lens that most people will suggest when you are getting into the EF system is the 50mm f1.8. This is the nifty 50. It is also a super inexpensive lens that you can use with it. In fact, you can buy them new for about $100. Less if you go with an older one and buy it on the used market. This is a nice, fast, normal viewing angle lens that essentially is a great way to really get going and learn the rules of composition. But if you're like me, you like something a little bit more. And my second lens that I made sure I picked up for my EF system especially when I got the 3000, was the 28mm f2.8. This is again a super affordable lens, and it gives you something a little bit wider. And again, it is super sharp, great for landscape work, great for working in the cities as just a nice little knockabout wide angle fast prime. Then there's lenses that Canon released that I'm not quite sure what they were thinking, and this is the lens that I actually got with the EOS 3000, and it's the 38 to 76mm. It's weird. I've seen a lot of weird focal length lenses before, but this one certainly takes the cake. It almost seems like Canon was trying to take some of their point and shoot lenses and convert them to interchangeable EF mount lenses. It's not the best. It has a lot of optical quality issues, but if it's the only thing you have, it's a great place to start, but I wouldn't actually actively seek out purchasing this lens. If you do want a good catch-all zoom lens, then you definitely want the 28 to 80mm Series 2. This is the epitome of a kit lens. 28mm at the wide end, 80mm at the top end. Don't expect the best results from it, but you know what? If you want to get that sort of elevated kit lens and just need something as a good carry-all lens for the camera, then the 28 to 80 is the one you want to go with. And the best part is you can find them for under $100, even for the Series 2. And then you just have a lens that will just carry on through all your other EF cameras if you decide to update later on from the 3000, and it will work on digital. And speaking of digital, the one thing you do want to avoid when purchasing and mounting lenses on your 3000 is avoiding the EFS lens mount. This is designed for the crop sensor digital cameras, and if you do mount it, you will cause damage to the lens and your camera body. So just stick to the EF. The problem is that because this is a lens mount that is still used today, a lot of the really good lenses, the fast optics, are a bit pricey, but you can still find decent older models for a fair price. At the time of filming this, again, this is all I have. I have 4 lenses for my EF kit. The one things I hope to add is the 40mm f2.8 pancake lens and an 85mm f1.8 or a 100mm macro. I'm not sure which one yet, but only time will tell. And there you have it. That's the EOS 3000. I like this camera. It's definitely one that I'm going to keep. Plus, it gives me another option for film reviews, developer reviews, and something that if I'm going into a situation where I don't really want to bring any of my good cameras, I can bring along this clunker. Plus, it makes another excellent option for the frugal film project. And the reason is they can be had fairly inexpensive, most ranging from $50 on the low end to up to $150 on the high end. And I really wouldn't pay any more for it unless it came with multiple lenses. And there's a good chance that at the higher end, you'll get a lens with it so that you can get started. Of course, purchasing additional lenses is going to cost you a bit more because the mount is still in use with Canon's digital offerings. But this is an absolutely fantastic camera. I have a lot of fun with it. And you know what? That's what film photography is all about in the end. Now, I have a limited lens kit, and I know for sure I'm going to be picking up a 40mm f2.8, but the lens I'm not sure about is what short telephoto or portrait focal length lens I should get. I am leaning towards the 85mm, but there's also a 100mm macro lens as well. So if you are a Canon shooter and are watching this video, let me know in the comments below which of those two I should get, and if there's any interesting lenses that you think I should keep an eye out for. If you aren't a Canon shooter, let me know what inexpensive SLR you love to use and what makes it so fun, and I may have to seek it out. Until next time, my name's Alex Oakes. Get out there, stay safe, keep it simple.